Good morning, everybody, and I have missed our reading on the weekend. Who else has missed our reading on the weekend? It is a great way to start the day. It is a reason to get up in the morning. It's a great way to learn some new things. But here we are reading again. So we still have Rich Dad Poor Dad in Chinese. Most of you don't speak Chinese, so we won't worry about that one too much. But we do have this amazing book, The Art of Thinking Clearly. Last chapter was chapter 17. You control less than you think, the illusion of control, which was a lot of fun. And today we're up to chapter 18. Never pay your lawyer by the hour. Incentive super response tendency. This is a really interesting chapter. But feel free to let me know what you've all been up to. And thank you to everybody on Bigo that is commenting and leaving lots of beautiful little messages. It's amazing having everybody here. But let's get into some reading and start the day off really well. Who's excited? I definitely am. Okay, to control rat infestation, French colonial rulers in Hanoi in the 19th century passed a law. For every dead rat handed into the authorities, the catcher would receive a reward. Yes, many rats were destroyed, but many were also bred specifically for this purpose. Sounds like it backfired a little bit. In 1947, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, archaeologists set a finder's fee for each new parchment. Instead of lots of extra scrolls being found, they were simply torn apart to increase the reward. Ooh, also backfired. Similarly, in China in the 19th century, an incentive was offered for finding dinosaur bones. Farmers located a few on their land, broke them into pieces, and cashed in. Oops. Modern incentives are no better. Company boards promise bonuses for achieved targets. And what happens? Managers invest more energy in trying to lower the targets than in growing the business. These are examples of the incentive super response tendency. Credited to Charlie Munger, this Titanic name describes a rather trivial observation. People respond to incentives by doing what's in their best interests. What is noteworthy is, first, how quickly and radically people's behavior changes when incentives come into play or are altered. And second, the fact that people respond to the incentives themselves and not the grander intentions behind them. So in certain circumstances, incentives will work to a degree, but we are going to see them as something selfish that we can use for ourselves. And if we can find a way of gaming the system, we definitely will. And this is not only for us, this is incentives on a much larger scale. So you need to really think about how you're going to set incentives in place rather than just quickly put something together and hope it works and then find out that people are abusing the system. So taking the time is really the key with setting incentives in this case. So a perfect example in Australia, for example, was the insulation bat scheme that they put together very, very quickly and discovered that people were exploiting the system. They found loopholes around it, and houses were catching fire and people were dying because of the implementation of this. And it was much too quick. Good incentive systems comprise both intent and reward. An example, in ancient Rome, engineers were made to stand underneath the construction at their bridges opening ceremony. Poor incentives, on the other hand, overlook and sometimes even pervert the underlying aim. For example, censoring a book makes its contents more famous, and rewarding bank employees for each loan sold leads to a miserable credit portfolio. Making CEOs pay public didn't dampen the astronomical salaries. To the contrary, it pushed them upwards. Nobody wants to be the loser CEO in his industry. So these are some really interesting examples. And somebody is just saying hello. So we'll say hello back on Bigo quickly. So getting somebody to stand under their construction to make sure that it actually works properly is a really good way to make sure that somebody's going to do a good job for you. And very often you need to think about, how is somebody going to look at exploiting the system? So for example, with the CEOs, when they said that they were going to make public how much CEOs were paid, they thought that it would be a discouragement, but they looked at it from the point of view of the public, of the government, of whoever created this. And they didn't look at it from the point of view of the person that was actually using it. And this is where we often go wrong. We stop we forget to take a step into the other person's shoes to see, how would I react if I was them? When you do this, there's a lot of power behind that, and it gives you a lot of scope with regards to achieving successes. Also, censoring a book, great example. Books that have been censored in the past, they go underground, it becomes difficult to find them, and they become very famous because everybody wants to read what's not allowed. Why do people in the Netherlands, for example, not smoke a lot of marijuana, whereas the foreigners that come over to Holland do? Because the Dutch people are allowed to, so they don't care so much. And the people who are from overseas, they're not allowed to, so they go crazy over it, knowing that they now have an opportunity to do something that they're not allowed to do. Do you want to influence the behavior of people or organizations? You could always preach about values and vision, or you could appeal to reason. But in nearly every case, incentives work better. They need not be monetary. Anything is usable, from good grades to Nobel Prizes to special treatment in the afterlife. For a long time, I tried to understand what made well-educated nobles from the Middle Ages bid adieu to their comfortable lives, swing themselves up onto the horses, and take part in the Crusades. They were well aware that the audacious ride to Jerusalem lasted at least 6 months and passed directly through enemy territory, yet they took the risk. And then it came to me. The answer lies in incentive systems. If they came back alive, they could keep the spoils of war and live out their days as rich men. If they died, they automatically passed on to the afterlife as martyrs, with all the benefits that came with it. It was a win-win no matter what happened. Imagine for a moment that instead of demanding enemies' riches, warriors, and soldiers charged by the hour, we would effectively be incentivizing them to take as long as possible, right? Definitely know that one. My lawyers used to be paid by the hour when I first started working with them, and they would take forever to read an email. So why do we do just this with lawyers, architects, consultants, accountants, and driving instructors? My advice, forget hourly rates and always negotiate a fixed price in advance. Or even better, negotiate a price based on the actual results, which is very similar to the Roman construction engineers standing under the bridges. So if somebody achieves a result for you, they get paid. If they don't achieve a result for you, then they don't get paid, but they also haven't done anything for you. Rather than paying them an hourly rate, and they can make excuses saying, but this is why it didn't work, this is why it didn't work, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. So that's a really great way of doing it. Be wary too of investment advisors endorsing particular financial products. They are not interested in your financial well-being sometimes, but in earning a commission on these products. The same goes for entrepreneurs and investment bankers' business plans. These are often worthless because, again, the vendors have their own interests at heart. What's the old adage? Never ask a barber if you need a haircut. That's a very true one. If you ask a barber if you need a haircut, they'll always say yes because they know that they're going to make some money out of it. Similar with doctors. But that is a very other story. We could talk for hours about that one. In conclusion, keep an eye out for the incentive super response tendency. If a person or an organization behavior confounds you, ask yourself what incentive might lie behind it. I guarantee you that you'll be able to explain 90% of the cases this way. What makes up the remaining 10%? Passion, idiocy, psychosis, or malice. Okay, I like that one a lot because it's very important to be able to see what's going on outside of yourself to understand how somebody's going to use an incentive that you might put in place. It's important to know how you can reward people in a way that it's going to be beneficial for them and for you for the greater vision. And it's important to be skeptical of what might be going on when somebody's advising you on investments or if they are going to do medical treatments on you. So let's have a look. Mladen's mentioned something in the chat here on Zoom. Salary versus wages. Salary guy receives money monthly. Wages guy receives money weekly. Salary guy, example, computer programmer, usually talks about before tax money. Wages guy, example, construction worker, usually talks about post-tax money. Who receives more? We might get the impression salary guy gets more money, which is not always true. That is absolutely the case. And it's also similar to farmers. Farmers sometimes only get paid once or twice a year, depending on which crops that they've grown. And it also has a different basis in how they think about things and how they talk about the money, and also their IQ. And that's a really interesting one, because they've done studies on farmers who only get paid once or twice a year, and their IQ is extremely low just before they get paid, because they are running on their last amount of money. And then as soon as they get paid, their IQ actually goes up. So also something that fits in well with that one. Okay, and then we're looking forward to tomorrow again. Now we've got 5 days of reading in a row, which is really exciting. So tomorrow is chapter 19, the dubious efficacy of doctors, consultants, and psychotherapists. Regression to the mean. That one's going to be very exciting. Thank you to everybody on Bigo for joining. Thank you, Mladen, for joining live on Zoom. And hopefully we have more people joining live on Zoom. We're also going to start doing some investment classes together in the evenings. I'm still setting up the last things for that. Thank you, Mladen, for sharing your ideas and thoughts as well that we could share in the group. And it is definitely very interesting to have a look at the difference between salaries versus wages. And we're having a lot of fun reading The Art of Thinking Clearly. I'm looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Have a great day. And remember to keep reading, keep learning, keep growing. And you're going to get better and better, and you'll start achieving more and more of those goals.